All right, folks. Wow, that was perfect timing. Perfect timing. All right, welcome to What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. I'm going to let Barnes do his thing and adjust a little bit there. Look at him. He's trying. This guy does what he's got to do to show up, boy. Listen, if you're listening only on audio, good for you. That's probably going to work for you today. All right, look, if you like the videos, like them, you know the drill. Share them far and wide. We're everywhere. Link for Robert and I are both in the description. Of course, the best place to follow us is on Locals. A shameless plug before we get started to buy the new book, Burn It Down. I cannot, and this interview today that we have with the congressman is a perfect example. By the way, Ed is welcome on the show. He obviously will be invited. We'll see if he takes that opportunity. But this is a perfect example. This race actually is a perfect example. And this is like the Republicans are in their final phase of being able to deal with this generational change, this generational shift before it's too late. And that's part of what I want to actually talk about a little bit today, Robert. By the way, as always, thanks for joining, brother. I know you're moving, you're moving hell and earth here. This is what I want to talk about with the congressman when he comes on here in a bit. Republicans just really don't get it. They're totally clueless. So you're wasting all of this money, brother, to defeat Massie, who represents a part of the coalition they can't win without. And it's a part of the coalition that you tweeted when the poll came out last week. You tweeted, this is the future of this movement, of this party. And you're sticking your thumb in its eye. It's just incredibly, incredibly stupid. And I got a slew of things I want to go through after, you get your chance to give your opening thoughts. But we got a slew of these polls. People said, Barnes and Baris are crazy. Iowa's not close. Florida's not close. They're crazy. All this stuff is going on. MAGA, 100% support, 98% support. And now, come on. You got played again, guys. I mean, I just don't even understand. I don't understand how your biases are so bad that you just didn't see the flares for a year, and now you're here. What's up, brother? Welcome.
Yeah, I'm up in Amish country. So the
Amish country. Tell Amos.
Yeah, I'll be flying out. So I got about 45 minutes or so. But wanted to hop on and say hi to Thomas and get this. For those that don't know, 1776 Law Center did a nationwide survey on a range of topics that are important, close to the heart of Thomas Massie and many of his supporters. And he can talk today about the Prime Act that trying to get through. I was talking to Amish farmers up here about that, and they were very hopeful that something like that were to go through because speaking of the politics being downstream from culture here in Amish country, after Trump won in 2024 with Robert Kennedy on board. Mm-hmm. The state of Pennsylvania, the county prosecutors, the state regulators, the ag department folks, they backed off for about a year. And they had been waging a full legal war on the Amish. And as soon as November 2025 came around, and here in Pennsylvania, a bunch of Democrats swept a bunch of local offices. Some cases they hadn't even held for more than a century. Some cases they had never held. All of a sudden, the war came right back. I mean, within a month of the election results, all of my Amish clients were getting hammered, and new Amish clients were getting hammered. And that's how it matters. It translates in a real world. Like some people keep thinking that Richard and I want to see people like Democrats in power in Pennsylvania. It's literally the last thing we want. But and that's why we're trying to warn of the risks. But people can't hear they don't want to hear the warning. So they pretend that we want the warning to come true. We're not warning here because we want the warning to come true. We don't want the warning to come true. And that means there needs to be a course correction at a key critical level. And some of the issues that has made Thomas Massie very popular around the country are issues that other members, people seeking congressional office, seeking state office, seeking local office, should also pursue. Whether that's transparency, whether that's accountability in our legal system, whether that's having a one-tiered, not two-tiered system of justice, whether that's food freedom, the right to buy food directly from the farmer and the farmer's right to sell it directly to you, medical freedom in the COVID vaccine context, the political freedom about censorship issues, and a range in financial freedom in dealing with the banking discrimination that the Amish have also been the victim of. So all the things that often important to the Amish cause or important to the American cause.
Yeah.
And a lot of life, everyday life, comes down from politics. And so if we need to, people need to be awake and alert, and take the warnings at heart. I mean, just this week, as Richard was talking about, surveys show Florida is a dead heat for the U.S. Senate, a dead heat for Congress, a dead heat for the governorship. The similar in Iowa, dead heat or Democratic leads in many cases.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty big lead for the governorship. That's
exactly
a big 8-point lead.
And Republicans barely had. And if you understand Iowa, Republicans are packed in the 4th district. What that generic ballot is telling you is the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd congressional district are all going to go Democrat. Exactly. Bye. And guess what Senate race? The other Senate race, even Cook Political Report, moved out of being safe today. The state of Nebraska. They're saying Nebraska is no longer a safe Republican Senate seat. Richard and I both got calls, and we talked about this was a race to watch, that a lot of people were asleep at the wheel thinking it had zero chance of flipping. Now, even Cook Political Report, which has been reluctant to move anything in the Democratic column or toward the Democratic direction because they've been so overstating Democrats now for a decade. Now they're overstating Republicans. Even they are saying, oh, Nebraska is something to watch.
Let me just say and explain to people that you were right last week when you were going over the House ratings, because you and I have talked about this like privately, off camera before. They need a cycle where the right-wing pollsters, who they call right-wing pollsters, who have been doing better than legacy media pollsters, myself, Rasmussen, Trafalgar, Qantas is new, but they came on board in 24, got labeled a right-wing pollster. They need a cycle where we are too bullish on Republicans, which they expect that to happen, and that Democrats will wind up winning by more than expected. They need a cycle where they understate Democrat support so they can get some of their credibility back. So people are looking at the Yale survey today. Folks, these rating changes don't happen. These Senate race changes don't happen. These House race changes don't happen. If Yale is right and it's a D+2 generic ballot, Robert knows, because I told Robert over the weekend and I showed him. We now have a D+11 generic ballot. In the weekend, I was apoplectic. People were, you're dooming, you're this, you're that. What Robert just said is 100% true. We don't necessarily want these things to be true. I was apoplectic. I didn't even want to do the job. I for like 8 hours over the weekend, guys, wanted to quit polling. I'm not kidding, because I'm like, you know what? It's pointless. I spend my own money, get called somebody I spend my own money for nothing. People are stupid. They don't listen. These dumb grifters are just they're disastrous to the movement. All right. I'm going to go ahead and, by the way, real quick, while I have a second, Robert, I'm just going to call out John Fredericks for repeatedly lying. If he keeps this up, he's going to have a real problem with me. I'll dedicate an entire show. Robert knows, because Robert saw it. We did not publicly poll the state of Virginia. You're a lying fuck. It's easily proven. You can go to Real Clear Politics and see if we have a public poll or not. We were the only ones to show Spanberger surge like that in the final couple weeks. And I personally made phone calls to other pollsters because I knew what I was just telling you, which is that they're waiting for the right-wing pollsters to fail, to make a mistake like this. And I called every single one of them and said, look, we're polling it privately for a friend. Spanberger just crossed 10%. You better go back in the field, because I think she's going to run away with this thing. And if it wasn't for me, then Matt from Insider Advantage would not have gone back in the field and polled. He would have failed. He would have had a close race. If it wasn't for me, Qantas would not have gone back in the field. It would have looked bad for them, and they're a new pollster. They're waiting for a cycle like this because they want to say, see, those guys were actually just leaning to Trump the entire time, and they're not really any better. We all make mistakes. They're doing this on purpose. If they move Nebraska, and if they moved Ohio to toss-up, it's because it's a toss-up. And actually, I don't even think it is at this point. I think Husted's going to lose, Robert. I do. But there you go, Nebraska.
Exactly. So everything we said about Iowa, Florida, Nebraska, where we got the biggest pushback was those three states. Huge. And then all of a sudden you're seeing polling survey data come out, with, basically 2 or 3. I suspect some of these people went into the field after they watched the show.
Yes, of course.
And were probably thought they were going to produce data that rebutted us, and instead it confirmed us.
Yes.
And for those that basically what I'm predicting is a D plus 10 double-digit Democratic win in the fall on the House ballot, and that's what Richard's polling is already picking up now.
Yeah,
it's the reality is, President Trump gutted Vice President Vance's effort. Vance thought he could get a deal done this weekend, and midway through the deal reason why it lasted 21 hours is Trump called him and said no to everything that he had originally agreed to, that Trump had originally agreed to. Were completely reversed course, and then demanded that JD constantly call Bibi Netanyahu before he did anything else. Trump people don't want to hear it. I know it went viral last week, me talking to Alex Jones. Trump is losing it, and he's at risk of losing the country and at risk of endangering the world. Vice President Vance knows this. High-ranking cabinet members know this. I was talking to someone earlier today who knows this. So there's a range of people who know this. I know people don't want to hear it, just like Democrats didn't want to hear that Joe Biden had slipped way past his prime. And yet everybody in the White House knew it. And that's why the White House forced the world to find out, including the Democratic Party, by scheduling the earliest presidential debate in modern American history. They did it because they knew he had lost it, but they needed the Democratic Party to see that he had lost it, so they weren't stuck with him on the ticket in November. We're doing the world the same favor those Democratic insiders did that almost pulled a rabbit out of the hat and were able to keep the White House that they were about to get crushed in. And so that's the reality, unless people around the president start to limit the president from having the worst ideas and worst policies afoot. People are going to, Vice President Vance stood up tremendously over last weekend, and prevented us from going into Trump's intentions of what really was a genocidal war that was going to have massive internal dissent within the military. This is all going to come out in time, folks. I know people don't want to hear it. People think we're making it up. Why in the world would we want this to be true? It's the last thing on God's green earth we want to be true.
I don't understand.
I didn't want Joe Biden to be losing it, for that matter. I don't want my president to be suffering some form of dementia. That's the last thing I want. But it's reality.
Yeah. It wasn't funny. When everyone not everyone, people who do this for a living and in this world knew that Joe Biden was gone. And there were so many people who are just blatantly lying about it. Maybe I poked fun at it, and I know I called him Geriatric Joe, but it wasn't funny, especially, and this is what made Mark Levin and these other neocons insane. Think about this, folks. This guy's advocating for a president he knows is senile to start a war with a great power who has nuclear weapons. Okay, when we were talking about the Ukraine war, you can't out of one side of your mouth say it's funny, joking, blah, 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 he's geriatric, he's senile, and then cheerlead for what could turn into a great power conflict. That is insanity. I don't care what your stupid little talking points are. If the president is not up to something like that, you should never want to cheerlead into a conflict. And it wasn't funny back then. It wasn't funny back then. And I want to play something. I see that Congressman's going to be doing his testing and stuff. But when he does come on, I don't want to interrupt him with clips and stuff. So I just want to play this because you get it all the time and I get it all the time. I don't want to blow anybody up here, but I went to a birthday party and I knew that some people were looking forward to meeting me and they hadn't seen me. And I said, you know what? I'll take her to the party. Right. So I go, really nice people, salt of the earth people, and by the way, I'm in a military area. And, and then inevitably, the questions ensue. And it's well, what's going on? And Robert already knows the story because I told him over the weekend. All right. But it turns into of course they did vote for Trump and they love Trump, but they just think he's totally off the rails right now. And it's an average common person. You were promised no new wars. You were going to get prices under control and you were going to stop the invasion and give mass deportations. Instead, they not only got the Iran war, they got 5 wars in total, 5 conflicts. If you count them up and you're not a liar about conflict, okay? There's 5 new conflicts, which are spiking the cost of inflation. It's spiking inflation. It's not helping it. We had the biggest surge since 2005 in the energy index last month. And then instead of mass deportations, and he did get control of the border, but they caved on deportations and will probably get an amnesty. And I know because the donors, drugged me into that whole thing to put this policy together. All right. So it's like, to the average person, they don't understand what the sycophants are thinking, Robert, because it's blatant to them. And then their second question is always, do you know how the vice president's doing? Man, we love him. Give him our support. It's like, now that's not going to be true of everybody, but it is true of most people that I'll talk to, and they'll ask me about this. All right. So who are these people? Guys, I actually want to bring this up. So you got played again. And I don't know how many times I got to warn you. Robert and I have to warn you guys. This happened during COVID. This happened during, the midterms in 18. You got played again by these legacy media pollsters. 100% support among MAGA. 98% support among MAGA. CNN and CBS News. All right. Now here's the new CBS poll. Okay. And obviously, this guy has cratered. The president has cratered with his core OG MAGA base, which is the white working class. Folks, you can't shift a net negative 40 plus points with a group that is the core of MAGA and have 100% support among MAGA. Like, you got played. And I don't think people understood the nuances, brother, of this argument. What is MAGA? Who makes up MAGA? Has it evolved over time? And I tried to explain to them about purification through subtraction. I thought it was the easiest way I could convey this to people so they could properly understand it. And people have a way of convincing themselves the things they don't want to be true aren't true. It's illusory truth effect. All right. I mean, this is known in my business, right? This is a phenomenon. Look at this. Is it at all possible in any way, shape, or form that he could have had no fractured base, no 100% almost unanimous support with MAGA, and then still have this kind of a shift with the white working class? Is that even possible?
And especially if you just go working class support across the board, you look at working class Hispanic, working class young, working class Black, you see 30 to 40 to 45%, up to 50-point collapses. What Richard and I talked about last week, we saw in live time.
Want to show them right there.
Exactly. Saw in live time in Wisconsin. Saw in live time in the north. For those that don't know, in Wisconsin, it swung the biggest Democratic victory for a Supreme Court race in the state's modern history, over 20 points. The swing in the industrial southeast, the Norwegian southwest and west, and the lumberjack country in the north, one of the most populous areas in the country, dating back to Fighting Bob La Follette. These are people that swung by 30 to 40 points against the Republican brand, since in just 12-month, 14-month, 15-month time frame. In Northwest Georgia, where Marjorie Taylor Greene's race was held, the Republican candidate ran approximately 17 points in margin behind her margin just last November. But if you looked at areas of the district that have a substantial Mexican American population, or African American population, or younger population, or blue collar population, the drop was even more massive. In some cases, it was as big as 50 points, 50-point swing. That's what's coming for the Republicans in the fall if they don't course correct. And one of the people that's actually giving them a good path, like someone said in the chat, you don't got to worry about amnesty as long as the Republicans have the Senate. They're trying to push amnesty through now.
They're trying to do it right now.
Trump is quietly, Stephen Miller, Mr. Anti-Immigration himself, implicitly acknowledged it this weekend. They are trying to push through. And who's one of the leading congressmen against this effort to do mass amnesty? It's the guy we're about to talk to, Thomas Massie. One of the congressmen leading. They're also trying to push through FISA authorization and massive expansion of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and with no limitations of any kind. Once again, this was something Trump promised he would not do, that he is now pushing. He's now pushing amnesty. He's now pushing the FISA privacy violation laws. Once again, one of the only congressmen standing up against it, taking the lead against it, Thomas Massie. Is it any coincidence that they're spending more money and more effort trying to defeat Thomas Massie than elect Republicans to the House? than elect Republicans to the Senate.
This is kind of the whole point of why I wanted to speak to Congressman Massie, because he's got a race. They're spending more money against him than I've ever seen them throw at any incumbent, especially in a district that size. We've just never seen anything like this before. Money that they will badly need. Money, by the way, that could have been spent on this Wisconsin Supreme Court race. The Democrats grossly outspent Lazar. I mean, guys, barely any money was spent to help Maria Lazar at all. She lost Iron County. Ashland, 36.8%. Bayfield, 31.2%. Douglas, 35.9%. Ladies and gentlemen, just to give you guys an idea, that's worse than Mitt Romney performed. It's that bad. That's how bad we're talking. And when you look at Congressman Massie's district, and I think he's ready. I'll bring him in a second. Let me just show that this is the hardens. To me, it just, when we're talking about how do you keep this coalition together, it's broken for the midterms, period. It's broken. But if you want to put it back together, do you really think it's wise to go after the one guy who stands for the coalition that, just look at age, guys. If it doesn't jump right out at you, I don't know how to help you. Okay. That is unbelievably stark. This is the definition of the problem Republicans are facing right now. And this is what they do with their money. Go after Congressman Massie, who, if he's ready, I'll bring on. It's just, actually, if he heard that, maybe I'd like to get the congressman's reaction to that and see what he has to say, because to me, it's just astonishing. Is he ready to go? Okay. All right. I'm going to bring him on now. Ladies and gentlemen, Representative Massie, let me pull this down. If you can see that, Congressman, first of all,
yeah.
Thank you for joining. I appreciate you coming on. I just don't know. I just want your reaction to this, because I just don't know what your colleagues in DC are thinking. If they're thinking at all, I just don't get it.
What reaction? I can see the poll there. It's pretty stark, the age crosstab.
Yeah.
No, exactly. It's like the young people want where you're going, and they're spending all these money for a literally fading out part of the electorate. And also it's source of information. Like I've been trying to tell people, a lot of your boomer cons get their information from Fox News, from talk radio. They think all kinds of things that don't make a lot of sense. But where you're at is where the future of the Republican Party is. It's where the future of the America is, with young people. Have you experienced that out on the campaign trail and talking to folks as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big wave coming, right? Let's just hope I'm not on the beach in the sand before the water gets here. Because look, that demographic that's 65 and up, those are the ones that have the highest propensity to vote.
Yeah.
So I think, Rich, you probably already talked about that. That's one of the cautionary things in this poll. Yes, I'm up 5 points, but if we have low turnout,
that's right.
And I do well in the Gen X, let's call it, the 50 to 64. I do well there. Those folks vote as well, but I'm blowing it away with the younger voters. It's like 75-25 or something like that. I can't exactly see the poll. I'm going by memory, but and let's just hope there's turnout there. We don't need some kind of magic turnout, right? It's not like I was on Rand Paul's presidential run in 2016, and everybody thought they could get the college students to show up in Iowa, and that did not happen.
Yeah.
But the whole campaign was based on that. But I've got support across the board. It's just who shows up to vote. We don't need irregular turnout. We just need normal turnout to win by 5 points.
Yeah, I think that's. Go ahead, Robert. Go ahead.
So I'm up here in Amish country, Congressman, and I was talking to them yesterday about a lot of Amish farmers. Politics is downstream from culture, but sometimes it's the other way around too. Since the Democrats resurged in 2025 here in Pennsylvania, all of a sudden the Amish harassment is back at scale. On everything known to man. Now, and I was talking to them about the Primac, and they were very hopeful and optimistic. I was saying that people need to back your campaign because you getting renominated will help the passage of the Primac, can you tell folks out there what the Prime Act is for food freedom? And in that same capacity, there were a lot of questions from them asking, when is the FDA, our mutual friend Robert Kennedy had made some promises, so I'm trying to help him deliver on those, going to get rid of their ban on raw milk. But you've got federal legislation proposed on that too. So can you tell folks about the Prime Act and what might get done on raw milk, or what you're proposing to get done on raw milk as well?
Well, let's start with the Prime Act. You know, I got industrial hemp passed in 2014. It was 2013, but it was 2014 before the bill came out, the Farm Bill, as an amendment to the Farm Bill. And that was a pilot program. And so I took the same approach with the Prime Act. And except instead of waiting until the end and trying to do it as an amendment, I worked with the chairman of the Ag Committee. And we actually have the language of a Prime Act in the Farm Bill, and it's already passed out of committee in the House, and it could come up for a vote in the House of Representatives this month, the House Farm Bill. The Senate, we haven't seen Senate language. I don't know if it would be in that. I don't know if it would survive a conference with the Senate, but the House is leading with the Farm Bill, and the Prime Act is in there. It's actually a pilot program for the Prime Act. Pun intended, I'm hoping it will give people an appetite for the full Prime Act. The Prime Act would allow a farmer to sell to a local consumer using one of these local custom slaughterhouses that doesn't have a USDA inspector. And the language of the pilot program, My Prime Act, says as long as you have some kind of inspection, like the local health department, they inspect restaurants typically. And as long as you have that level of inspection of the meat processing facility and the farmer and the consumer are in the same state, then you don't need the federal government involved in that transaction or in the inspection of that meat. And, you know, I got this actually in the base text of the Farm Bill last Congress when I was on the Rules Committee, but people are excited about it. And I do think instead of seeing it as a burden, you know, the chairman of the Ag Committee, he sees it as a positive thing that'll help him build public support for the Farm Bill and support within Congress for the Farm Bill. So that's an exciting thing, is that and you're right, by the way, Robert, if I lose this primary, I'm a lame duck, and the incentive to keep it in there goes way down, particularly if the Farm Bill drags out, which it could. It's already drug out a year with an extension. If it drags out for months and it goes past, you know, this end of this Congress, then that won't happen. Another piece of legislation that I want to tell you about, and I think both of you can appreciate this, Rich, as a statistician, I think you can appreciate this, and Robert, as a lawyer, the NICS background check is racist. Now, let me start with that. John Lott, who's an economist and a statistician, he's written 9 books on the Second Amendment. He pointed out to me several years ago that the NICS background check system is sloppy. And if you have a phonetically similar name to somebody who's been incarcerated in prison for a year or more, you will get denied a purchase of a gun at a gun store. And then the first appeal is rather easy, but after that first appeal, if you don't succeed, then you may have to retain a lawyer. And a lot of people just give up trying to buy a gun from a gun store if they get rejected by the NICS background system. Well, here's the thing. African Americans share first names and surnames frequently. And if you are an African American and you go to buy a firearm and you fill out that form 4473, the golden form people call it, you're 3 times more likely to share a name with somebody who's a prohibited person. In other words, they've been convicted of a crime that has a sentence of a year or more. And if you're Hispanic, you're twice as likely as a Caucasian to be falsely denied, because again, within ethnicities and races, people share names more frequently. It's just a cultural thing. So this bill that I wrote is and by the way, I got it passed through the Judiciary Committee and I got every Democrat to vote for it. Imagine this, pro-gun legislation that you can get Democrats to vote for.
Never happens.
Yeah. Because and the bill is very modest in what it does. What it does is it requires the DOJ to give us information, the crosstabs, if you will, Rich, if this were a poll, about the denials by race or ethnicity, the frequency of denials, because what that data will show if the DOJ will release it. And by the way, they collect it. And we're not, when you fill out the form, you put your race or ethnicity on there. You also put your sex on there. And so we'll get that information as well. But when we get that information, we can show that the sloppy NICS background check system, which results in 10 or 100 times more false denials than it does in accurate or positive denials. In fact, in one year, they had 112,000 denials, only 12 convictions. So that says it's 10,000 to 1 false denials to actual real denials. And what's happened is people haven't been concerned about false denials, but I think when my legislation passes and it's scheduled to come up in the House in the May 12th week, I can't tell you which day of that week, but the majority leader told me that bill is scheduled on the docket to be voted on, and I'm hopeful it will pass. In fact, they may bring it up under suspension, which means they think it could pass with 2/3 vote. And once that passes, if we can get it through the Senate and then it becomes law, we'll have that data. And everybody will then be incentivized, particularly minorities, to make the NICS background check system tighter instead of being so loose that it results in so many false denials. So I got an attorney and a statistician. I don't know what you call yourself, Rich, but I think you can both, economists, you can both, I think, appreciate why that data is important.
Yeah, and also, Congressman, I mean, if you're on the right, and of course, you're trying to expand your voting base in your tent, you want other groups, not just Caucasians, to enjoy the freedoms of the Bill of Rights, so that when someone comes for them and someone tries to take them away, they appreciate more what it means. Yeah, I didn't know it was that bad, but John has explained this to me briefly. We did talk about this very issue, actually. I didn't know that much about that. Denial rate is huge.
Yeah.
That's massive.
To your point, I'll say this on air. I haven't really said this before, but I am the chairman of the Second Amendment Caucus. When Lauren Boebert got elected to Congress, I made her a deal. If she would do most of the work and give me half the credit, we could be co-chairs. And she took me up on that deal. So I literally almost franchised this Second Amendment Caucus. I'm thinking about starting another one if you can find somebody else that'll share the credit and do the work. I'm being somewhat facetious, but one of the things that we do in the Second Amendment Caucus is arrange a training program for congressmen and staff of congressmen so that they can get their concealed carry permit in Washington, D.C. And it's dozens of members of Congress have gone through this and gotten their concealed carry permit. And to your point, Rich, the more that congressmen exercise the right to carry, the more incentivized they will be to make sure that right doesn't go away for everyone else. And I've got another piece of legislation, National Constitutional Carry Act, that sort of leapfrogs the reciprocity bill that's being pushed. The reciprocity bill was a great idea back when all the states required you to get a permit, but now you have 29 states where you don't need a permit. And I think that, all the states, this is since the McDonald versus Chicago case, the Second Amendment bears on the states. It didn't bear on the states until the McDonald versus Chicago case. But now my bill would say, okay, the Second Amendment, it applies to the states as well as Washington, D.C., which we found out in the D.C. versus Heller case. So I'm just saying in the National Constitutional Carry Act that if you can own a gun in a state, you have to be able to carry it without asking permission.
Exactly. Two other pieces of legislation I wanted to discuss that are current and contemporary, and where once again your office is one of the few standing up to highlight the concerns. One is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act authorization they're trying to push through. The other is the mass amnesty bill they're trying to push through, which even you have long pointed out that certain aspects of E-Verify have nothing to do with illegal immigration and everything to do with trying to stick us into this surveillance control grid. Well, there's no better evidence of it than an amnesty bill that includes a massive E-Verify provision. Because it's like, who are you E-Verifying when you're giving everybody amnesty?
Yep.
So can you talk about the new amnesty bill that's afoot and the new FISA bill they're trying to sneak through while everybody's distracted by war?
Yeah, let me start with the amnesty one. And you're right, Robert. This has been my point. E-Verify is just another government scam to collect your data and require you to seek permission from the government, in this case, in order to work. Let me just give you an example of how that could be abused. If you remember during COVID, Joe Biden did mandates and he tried to use OSHA to enforce. Ironically, OSHA began by saying that employers couldn't force their employees to be vaccinated. They were trying to protect the employee. And so employers couldn't force the employees. But then OSHA flipped under pressure from Biden from the top, and they became the enforcer of the vaccine mandate until that was struck down by the courts. But if you have E-Verify, I call that will turn into V-Verify, for instance. They will say, well, here's how we're going to enforce it. You got to have permission from the government to work. And we've got the framework already here. We'll use this as an enforcement mechanism, much like they tried to use OSHA as an enforcement mechanism, but for other things as well. And what people don't realize is it's when you think about it, you think, oh, yeah, why wouldn't I want illegals to be verified? Well, the reality is that's an impingement on every American. Like, if you want to go to work, you have to get E-Verified. And when this comes through the Judiciary Committee, I have amendments that I offer. One of them, I said, well, what if you're a veteran, a U.S. citizen and a veteran, you shouldn't have to get E-Verified. So I offered that amendment, and most Republicans voted against it. I got a few Republicans to vote for it, but most Republicans voted against my amendment that exempted veterans, people who are willing to risk their lives for this country, from having to go through E-Verify. And then I had a couple other amendments. One was to provide a private right of action. Let's say that you got denied employment falsely, much like the NICS background check. By the way, if E-Verify has the same failure rate as NICS background check, unemployment's going to be 30%. But I offered an amendment to provide a private or a cause to sue the government if they prevented you from working falsely for a period of time under E-Verify. But anyways, to your point, Robert, look, they're already talking about amnesty, and these are the same people that want E-Verify. My question is, what if somebody tries to get a job and you find out they're not eligible for a job? Is the government going to show up and deport them? No, there's no plan to do that. And this is just like Real ID. The Real ID was pushed on conservatives as a way to, by the way, to keep illegals or illegal aliens from flying on airplanes or going into government buildings. But they've created exemptions. You can see the people who are being flown in airports that have come into the country. This was mostly under Biden, and they're relocating them. You can see them at the airport. Sometimes it's kids with their backpacks. They're not U.S. citizens. The government will create an exemption, and these are not enforcement mechanisms that they ever plan to use to enforce immigration rules. It will be used against American citizens. I can guarantee it. So I support.
Can I ask you something real quick in between that before you go on to FISA? Because you just brought it up. That's what I was going to ask you about. Well, real ID, this sounds very similar, right? And the right is supposed to be reflexively, knee jerk against database buildups like this. What is to stop, since there are exemptions for real ID? What is there to stop, and I'm not picking on the president or anything, but like what is it to stop one of the president's friends from getting an exemption for E-Verify if they work in hospitality or work in, they work in hospitality, if they own a bunch of hotels, Congressman, and they want exemptions for E-Verify, what's to stop them, right?
Right. Well, the president's already announced that he's going to have ag worker exemptions. And also hospitality worker exemptions.
Okay.
So yeah, they're going to grant exemptions to E-Verify just like they did Real ID. The government will blow a hole right through this. By the way, I don't have a Real ID myself. You may say, well, how do you fly?
How do you get around? Because I was forced to. I had to do it. I just had. I didn't like it, but you had to, or at least me.
Yeah. So I have a passport card, so you can carry. If you have a passport, you're eligible to get a card that's the same size as a driver's license, and you carry it in your pocket just like a driver's license, and it's basically a copy of your passport laminated. Now you can't use that to travel overseas. I think you can use it to cross the border into Canada or Mexico. I'm not sure. It's best to take your real passport in any of those circumstances. But to fly domestically, you can use your passport, or you can use this passport card, which is a lot more convenient. And I figure, well, since they've already got some information on me with my passport, why give them more information? And by the way,
I suspect it's the foreign overseas trip that Laura's going to say. That's why you needed Real ID. There it is. She wants a vacation. There it is. Go ahead.
Well, that's the argument that some people make. Well, I didn't give them any extra information. I didn't tell them my salary or, how many kids I have or, what TV channels I watch. I didn't have to give them any more information other than to prove conclusively that I was a citizen. Well, no, duh. This is not Real ID. Is not the database. Real ID is your index card into the database.
Yeah.
All they want to be able to do, they want to have physical evidence on your body that proves that your physical being matches the database they have on their computer. And once they have that conclusively, they can force all sorts of things on you, anything they want, using that database because they know it's you. It's a very dangerous thing. And so shouldn't go for Real ID, but that water, for the most part, is under the bridge or over the dam, whatever you want to say. But you can still, if 10% of us just don't get a Real ID, it's going to make it hard for them to enforce it for the final plan of what they actually want to do with it. Okay, so I do not support the amnesty. I support deporting illegal aliens. I have voted to fund the wall, although ironically they say that that illegal immigration is almost zero now, but the wall is still mostly uncompleted. So how do you resolve that? But I have voted to fund it. And let me bring this point up. In the Judiciary Committee, where we mark up things like E-Verify and things like that, where I can offer amendments, we also do constitutional amendments. And so we've marked up a term limit bill, and we've marked up a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, which is not going to work because all it requires is 2/3 vote to unbalance the budget. And you can go back and look in the last 10 years. Guess what? At least one chamber for the last 10 years has passed multiple CRs and omnibus bills in any given year with 2/3 vote.
Yeah.
Like the Uniparty has no problem getting to 2/3. They can get to 80% on an omnibus bill if they make it big enough and have enough spending. Okay, that's a little sidetracked. So we got all these reforms that are constitutional amendments that are supposed to magically solve things. The biggest reform we could have in Congress, and this would just, all we would have to do is make a rule and follow our own rules, is one subject per bill. Because that way they couldn't put E-Verify in the border enforcement bill, because it's a separate topic. That would be worker requirements. And so as we talk about these things, my opponent can run ads. Let me give you an example. He's running an ad saying that I voted against defunding transgender surgeries for minors. Okay. On a standalone bill, Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill, I voted to ban that and defund that kind of activity. But they put the transgender ban in the big, beautiful bill that passed in the House. But then it got stripped out as it went through the Senate. So they passed the big, beautiful bill that became law, put the funding back in for transgender surgeries. So if you voted for both of those bills, they could, and virtually everybody but me did, I voted against both of those bills. But regardless of how you voted on the big, beautiful bill, somebody can run an ad saying you voted to fund transgender surgeries, or you voted against defunding it. When the reality is, as a separate item, I have voted to defund it.
And on FISA, isn't this going to be a very similar situation, right? So in the future, if they were to throw a reauthorization into something similar, which it doesn't have to be the issue here, but if they did, then later they come back and say the same thing. He was against FISA reform, even though it was just stuffed in with everything. This is a question actually right now. People are asking, why is FISA reform so hard? Why is it so difficult? You know, the president ran on, it's one of his Agenda 47s, completely obliterating the deep state. I mean, as part of that proposal, we had to reform the FISA court. Yet he is now calling for a clean reauthorization. Why is it so difficult on Capitol Hill to tackle FISA?
Well, they would tell you when they're gaslighting you that they've already reformed it, Rich, and you don't need to do anything else. They're a lot better behaved over at the FBI now. And so you don't need to worry about this anymore. By the way,
do we know that though? Right? Do we really know that, since Michael Horowitz did the Inspector General report, which basically said they never follow Wood's procedures anymore? It's basically just it's there. They know they're supposed to do it, but they don't, according to his own review. We don't really know that cash is any better, do we?
They're bragging that the number of violations has gone down drastically, but there's still violations.
But yeah.
And so the kind of reforms that would be, substantive is one of them is to have an amici at the FISA court, for instance. Another, which would represent the person who's not there. In other words, just sort of a conscience to say, wait, what are you doing here? But the biggest thing they need is just get a freaking warrant, a judicial warrant, in order to go pilfer that database. And I've seen this happen on the floor. They get congressmen confused. The whip team will come up, or somebody on the Intel committee, and say, oh, we don't target U.S. citizens. No, that's never been the case. We don't do that. And they can say something that's a little bit true without being false, but they're misleading the people. So it is the case that their policy is not to target Americans when they collect this information. But you can imagine, like, if they have an AI collecting this information, how much information they collect in the pursuit of foreign nationals in targeting them. And so they've got this enormous database. And then once they've compiled that database, they go in at fishing for your information. And what they say is, well, we didn't need a warrant to collect the information, so we don't need a warrant to look at it. The problem is, the reason they didn't need a warrant to collect the information is they were going after foreigners overseas, ostensibly. And so they should have to have a warrant if they're going to put a U.S. citizen's identifier in there to search the database. That's like the one change that we need.
I gotta head out, but right before I do, I wanted to ask you this question, Congressman. You're facing a situation where the representatives and supporters of a foreign government are trying to buy a House seat in Kentucky. spending at least 25 million. I've heard reports of 50 million ultimately intended to be spent by Miriam Adelson, who's a citizen of Israel, who also a citizen of the United States, but whose primary loyalty is to Israel, who doesn't live in Covington, Kentucky, or anywhere close. The John Paulson, the Wall Streeter, the man in the Epstein list, making big donations for your opponent, special ed there. And then we have, last but not least, Paul Singer. Richard and I know him very well from him co-sponsoring Russiagate funding all the way back. Another Wall Streeter, another hedge funder, another Israel firster trying to buy the seat. And we see the significance and consequence of that right now in the war that's going on in Iran. The president is now back on the escalatory ladder there. There's talk about finally a vote in the House coming up on it. So that here what we have is someone trying to buy a House seat, stop an opponent of these dumb forever wars, endless wars, which our president campaigned against, but now has got us stuck into. We have published reports that Bibi Netanyahu is the first person the vice president was told to call to find out what he could and couldn't do in negotiation on behalf of the United States of America. So we got to get Bibi's approval first. Can you talk about what may be coming up in the House? One, what's it like having $50 million dumped on your head in small town Kentucky by this corrupt foreign lobbyist? But also, what's coming up in the House in terms of trying to restore the constitutional role of Congress, that we don't let one man take us to war?
Yeah. First of all, I don't think it's quite 50 million. It may not even be 25 million yet, but they are spending, or have been spending, about $1 million a month against me. And they started last summer. Okay. So they spent $2 million last summer, and they have, I mean, you can look at the data, Rich. Yeah. It's no longer a secret. You released your poll. They have really taken down my job approval rating, my fave, unfave. And I'm the same person voting the same way. And if you think money doesn't matter in an election, I'm sorry, it absolutely matters. You can turn that money knob and see how it changes public opinion, because they run these ads wall to wall, and it's not a real expensive media market. So $1 million a month buys a lot of ads against me, and it's done a lot of damage. And that's why it's a close race. If it weren't for their money, and this is all, frankly, Israel first money, although I will put an asterisk for Paul Singer. He bought the national Venezuelan oil company called Citgo for pennies on the dollar just weeks before we invaded Venezuela. So he's famous for buying troubled, distressed assets that belong to other countries and then suing the countries into submission. But in this case, the enforcement is our men and women who, signed up to protect our country. They're basically helping. They're the repo man for Paul Singer.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Congress. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, but he stands to make billions of dollars.
I just looked. Yeah. And it's a yes. No, Robert and I had talked about this before. It really is incredible. Somebody brought up, and it was a question in the chat, and I know you're getting close to your time, but somebody brought up, and I'm not sure it's possible. And Robert just had to go, so he's the lawyer here.
Right.
But pardon reform for this stuff. I mean, this is really, out in front. This is not Trump's first administration. It's a very different animal. And you have something like that transpired, right? And Palantir and all this other stuff. And there's a couple of people who mentioned in the chat, ask them about pardon reform. Is there even anything you can do in the chat for something? I mean, in the Congress for something like that? I mean, that's pretty much.
It's baked into the Constitution.
Yeah. It's in the power, guys.
I think there's very little. Now, elections are also baked into the Constitution. Right. And Congress still makes rules about elections. For instance, the SAVE Act, which I voted for twice, although it will be challenged, I'm certain, by the left, but I support it because it covers just federal elections. But as far as the pardon power, that's one of those things that's absolute and of the purview of the executive branch. I respect the divisions between the branches. Now, the executive branch does not respect Congress, and Congress doesn't even respect itself to the degree that they allow the executive branch basically to make laws on the fly. So, but I'm not sure that there's anything that you could do in terms of pardon reform that would hold up. And I kind of like, it's kind of like jury nullification, right? I like jury nullification. I like the fact that citizens could throw any case out if they think justice is not being served. And again, we should have a lawyer to check me on that. And so I can't anticipate what kind of pardon reform would survive scrutiny.
I can't either. Yeah.
In the context of the Constitution. And it's not such a bad thing unless maybe if you made him do it before the midterms.
So there's a price to pay.
Yeah,
yeah,
or something. I don't know. And then maybe some more specificity on what they're being pardoned for, right?
Yeah. Blanket is what we've been seeing lately with Biden too. I mean, it's blankets. Yeah.
But I think there's a historical precedence, like pardoning Vietnam veterans like carte blanche without naming them by name. Sorry, not veterans, the people who dodged the draft. Pardoning them.
Sorry.
I don't go there. So I'm coming up blank on pardon reform.
Yeah.
I do want to say one thing because the lawyer's not here. He said that John Paulson is on the Epstein list. John Paulson was in Epstein's black book of phone numbers, and John Paulson also held a gala to honor Howard Lutnick and solicited Jeffrey Epstein to sponsor a table, I think for $50,000. That we found in the Epstein files. So John Paulson was in the black book, which came out many years ago. And I exposed that once I found out he was a donor. Then he put out a statement denying any involvement with Epstein. But just like Howard Lutnick, and ironically in the same email with Howard Lutnick, he shows up in the Epstein files.
That to me, you've got your whole entire district is like this. It's very independent minded. It's not like you haven't butted heads with the president in the past, right? I mean, we pretty much know this relationship, which I think, again, you represent a part of that Republican coalition where it's necessary if you want to win national elections. Do you think a lot of this time, because this is an unheard of amount of money? I mean, I have never, by the way, we have asked this question in different districts. People have a tendency to lie and say they saw an ad or a door knocker or whatever, but it still gives you a very good idea where money's going, what are people seeing. Do you think this time this really is about the Epstein files, and that's why we're just seeing an ungodly amount of money thrown at you like this? Is there any doubt in your mind that it's not that you just, the BBB, you had issues with the BBB, stuff like that? I mean, or is this really about the Epstein files? What do you think? I'm curious.
It's the world is small enough that all of these things converge.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
And so Miriam Adelson and Paul Singer and John Paulson were motivated to come after me before the Epstein files. Now they're doubly motivated because one of them, shows up in the Epstein files. So I think they're doubly motivated by the Epstein files. But I went back and looked at some of the votes I've taken where I was the only vote. So people say, oh, you're an obstructionist. How are you obstructing something when the vote's 420 to 1?
Right.
Barely a speed bump, right? What they're upset about is that I go online and I have a microphone and a platform and a following, and I tell people what's in the bill. So I think obviously, the administration doesn't want any Republican congressman thinking for themselves. And so they're trying to teach me a lesson, but also to teach all the other Republicans a lesson about never stray from what we tell you to do. Okay. But also the 3 billionaires are trying to teach them a different lesson, which is do not vote against any of the dozens of resolutions and sometimes laws that come up in the House of Representatives that are specifically for Israel. Because, and when I vote against those, if I do vote against those, it's because they're trying to infringe on freedom of speech. For instance, the 420-1 vote that I'm telling you about, in that bill, they were suggesting that the internet should be censored to combat anti-Semitism. The problem is their definition of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And in a subsequent resolution bill that I voted against, they referenced, I've never seen a law do this, but they referenced a website in another country for the definition of anti-Semitism. I mean, laws should be permanent. You shouldn't reference somebody's website. And so you should put whatever, if you can define it, then put it in the bill. And that's what the law should be. But they'd rather point it to a URL. And then if you go look at them, they don't even define it. They give examples of anti-Semitism by way of examples. And then if you want some of their examples, literally ban recitation of the New Testament. There are things that are asserted in the New Testament that is considered anti-Semitism in the international website definition of it. So, Rich, that is the lesson they're trying to teach the rest of Congress. I am unreformed. They're either going to beat me or I'm going to win. And either way, they ain't teaching me a lesson.
Honestly, Congressman, either way they lose. Here's what they haven't gotten through their head yet. The age signal is too strong. You can't keep asking Miriam Adelson for $25 million to throw it in a member of Congress who may have the gall to speak up or, not toe the line every time on these issues. Israel has taken a massive beating in its public image. And I think, because I know the website and what you're talking about, I know what you're referencing. And it's the American people's problem is that, okay, we get that you're incredibly sensitive about anti-Semitism, and none of us want that either. But you're mixing in criticisms of the nation with, hatred towards a religious ethnic group, right? And that is a deal breaker for Americans. And then, by the way, you have the left, who just has been like this for a while. It's the right, under 50, under 55, that this is new. And they're not going to change their minds now. So the smarter thing would have been to approach to try to coalition build again. Don't try to just railroad everybody and spend $25 million against Thomas Massie, because even if you replace him, in the short term, you lose in the long term. And actually, it's not that long way. The age signal is so strong, it'll begin to happen rapidly, and Republicans will find themselves without a coalition. This is the danger of what they're doing here. Just to give people, and I don't even know if you know this number, you probably do. I did not know the number until just now, until it was just given to me. This is stunning to me. For a member of Congress, that is absolutely stunning. $6.7 million for a congressional candidate. This is the last question I wanted to ask you, Congressman. Almost everybody in our poll told us that they have seen a negative ad against you. Almost it is a huge number for people who do this for a living. Not as many said that they've seen a positive ad towards your opponent, who, by the way, is welcome on the show to talk about these things. They just, maybe that, I don't know what it comes to. I guess I want to give you an opportunity to tell people what kind of a lawmaker you think he'd be. Because we don't really know. Even the people in the district don't seem to understand where he's coming from. You have the 65 plus who are still core Trump supporters who are like, okay, Trump said so, I'm going to vote for him. But there's no, what does so-and-so stand for? It's not there. So what do you think it would be?
The reason the Gun Owners of America, National Association for Gun Rights, and the Northern Kentucky Right to Life have all endorsed me is because I filled out their forms, their questionnaires. Yeah. Like, he wouldn't even fill out the Right to Life questionnaire. So I don't even know if he knows what he believes or what he would do when he gets there. He's promised to be a rubber stamp for Donald Trump. When I'm talking to groups, I say, the problem in Washington, D.C. is these guys make you promises when they're campaigning, and then they go to D.C. and they just go along to get along. This is the first time I've campaigned against a guy who promises to go along to get along. Like, that's his biggest attribute. That's what he claims he will do, that he will be a reliable vote for the party, for the president. And you know what's ironic about that? If he were to win, he's likely to be sworn into a Republican minority in the House of Representatives based on the polling that you've done. And then if we ever get the Congress back, while he is a congressman, we get the majority back, Donald Trump won't be the president then. Who's he going to be a yes man for at that point? Well, let's look at who he's donated to in the past. He's donated to Lindsey Graham. So that's as close as we can get to trying to figure out what he stands for. He also, by the way, the idea that he would be a reliable vote for the party or for Trump is somewhat laughable, because just a week or two after Trump cinched the Republican nomination, for presidential candidate in the late spring of 2016, my opponent left the party, and he stayed out of the party for about 5 years. He only came back after Joe Biden beat Donald Trump, and Donald Trump was no longer the torchbearer for our party. That's when my opponent came back and registered Republican again.
Did he ever because you do know this. Okay. Has he ever given an explanation for that? We actually asked. Has there ever been the official party line on here on why he did this?
He said that he tries to blame it on me. He said that I was the congressman and that's why he left, or that I was involved in the Republican Party and that's why he left. But
would a Democrat have been better?
Well, here's the problem this is, I guess, breaking news on your show. Nobody's ever really asked the question you asked, but it also begs this answer, which is that was the second time he left the party. When he was registered in Florida, he left the party, the Republican Party, and we have evidence of that as well. So he's prone to getting upset and leaving the party. So the question is, even his claim that he would be a rubber stamp for the Republican Party is dubious at best.
Both closed primary states, Congressman. If you want to participate in Republican politics, you have to register as a Republican. And those explanations don't fly.
Yeah. And in Kentucky, by the way, if anybody's watching this and wants to change their registration from independent to Republican in Kentucky, it's too late to do that. If you're a new voter or you just moved to the state, you have until the 20th of this month to register. But if you're trying to change parties, you had to do it back on December 31st. So ironically, he couldn't even vote in Republican primaries for a while. So there's a few votes that he missed when he was out in the wilderness. And again, being faithful to the party is not the be all end all, unless that is your be all end all. Yeah. That is like what he's claiming he will be. And one more point, he has turned down 6 debates or forums. I'm including the forums, like the little softball things where you go in and you take turns answering questions, and you take turns on the stage and neither candidate can speak to the other, right? Like it's the most tepid form of debate. And he's turned those down, but he's turned 6 of them down. He runs like a scared schoolgirl, and he's supposed to be this tough guy. And he says, well, Congressman Massie's had 14 years to tell people where he stands. Oh, that's true. But where do you stand? Like, we don't know.
That's not the point.
Yeah.
You have the record. People do know where you stand. That's the entire point of a challenger. You have to, and we see this. And folks on the more on the higher profile races, like a presidential debate, you always want to see the challenger is the one who always wants to get the incumbent to debate, because the challenger is looking for a breakout moment, and the challenger wants to define who he is or who she is and what they'll do in office. This is the opposite of what we typically see. And by the way, the same with voter registration. It's the opposite. Usually independents will pick a party so they could try to vote in a primary. They don't typically leave it in a closed state to be an independent. It's a little different. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, those are all great points. The go. Yeah. I mean, he would be a disaster. He's my papaw, my late papaw would say he's a pig in a poke. And a poke is an Appalachian word for a bag. And if you buy a pig in a poke, you don't get to inspect the pig.
That's a new one to me. It's just not my neck of the woods, but the expression definitely makes sense. I'm getting kind of the cue here, but
by the way,
thank you for coming on. If you got go ahead.
Yeah,
finish.
one quick thing you mentioned, conventional wisdom is if you're ahead, you don't want to debate. The challenger, the one who's behind, is typically the one who's trying to egg on a debate and trying to get as many debates as possible. I'll tell you why I want to debate. This race is over in 36 days. I wish it was over tomorrow. Okay. For me, this race has been going on since last summer when they started running, before they even had a candidate. They were running ads against me. I think I could end this race in one debate with this man. And I think his handlers know that too. And that's why they're keeping him in the basement or on his back porch. He can't even wave at cars. They're keeping him out of public sight. He's not a good public speaker. Once I recognized, just from the small exposure that he's had in speaking at events, that he doesn't know what he thinks. He doesn't want to say the things that he does think. And he's just not very well spoken other than trying to tear me down. I would love to just have a chance to debate him.
Just from my point of view, and then I'll throw it to you, tell people where they can go and learn more. But just from my point of view, the right was furious when Joe Biden hid in the basement. They were furious, and it's like, come out. But of course, his campaign knew that he wasn't up for it. He just wasn't. To me, it's a level of respect you have to give to the voter. There's one thing. There's the money that's like, air campaign from the sky that just bombards your opponent. You have to talk to the voter. It's one of the reasons why Iowa, guys, the first caucus in the nation, New Hampshire. These are small states. You can shake hands, get to know people. It was and has been a tradition in this country for a while. I'm not a fan of the hiding at all, Congressman.
By the way, when they did let Joe Biden out of his basement, they took him to a Dairy Queen so that he could get ice cream. They literally they have no situational awareness. They took Ed Galrine to a Dairy Queen, and he descended upon the patrons in there. That's one way to get a crowd, right? Go to a Dairy Queen after a ball game or something, right? So he had this captive audience, and somebody started filming it, and his people tried to shut down somebody in a public spot trying to film what they were witnessing in their little Dairy Queen. But it's like they literally, everything they're doing is out of Joe Biden's playbook.
Yeah, they figure they have the money to play it safe. It's textbook, guys. That's textbook. We'll tell everybody where they can learn more, Congressman. What's the best thing they can do?
Well, the best thing they can do, and I'm not in Congress right now, so I can talk about my website, thomasmassie.com/donate. The best thing they can do is go there and donate. The only reason I do have a lead, and by the way, it's a single-digit lead, as your public poll shows. The only reason I do is because we've had like 30,000 grassroots donors. Some of them give $20, some of them give $3,500, some of them give $100. But when the average donation, and I don't want to spoil the surprise, but we're going to release our Q1 fundraising today early. And we gave a reporter an exclusive on that. It's going to pop some.
Oh, so you can't spoil it? I was hoping you would.
It's going to eyeballs. Well, that in 42 hours, we raised $445,000 in a money bomb and that's part of last quarter. Now, we didn't raise that much every day of last quarter, but we had one of the best quarters of any member of Congress. And that's the only reason I am still in this race and still winning, is because people have gone to thomasmassie.com/donate and given whatever they could. Some people are on a monthly donation. They can end that donation in a month, but please keep going for one more month, because we're buying, this is public information. We're buying like a couple $100,000 of TV ads a week ourselves. you can go look this up. We bought, I think, $300,000 for 2 weeks, a week after the money bomb. And we aren't sitting on a big pile of money. Okay. As soon as it comes in, I have a Sunday night call with my TV guy, and he rakes it all out of the bank account.
It's out the door.
It's like, he's like, how much have you got?
Yeah.
And and that's what we do. And that's why we're still in this race. And like your poll showed, the negative info flow against me is insane.
It's massive.
And so what we have simultaneously been doing two things: running ads to counter that, like to punch at him, but also to do positive messaging. And in these last few weeks, we're going to do a lot of positive messaging.
Yeah, that's I was going to tell you this, and I'm glad you said that as a reminder before I let you go. But after a while as a pollster, it gets a little bit not mundane, but certainly monotonous, right? I mean, how many times can you ask, do you approve or disapprove? The voters,
right track, wrong track,
right track, wrong track. The voters of the 4th were they're funny. They were entertaining. They were funny. They were gracious. Some of them, of course, you run into mad voters all the time who get angry all the time. And I was speaking to a reporter about this when we were polling your district. But it was an interesting district. It really was. Do
you think they have poll fatigue?
I was just going to say, I'll tell you the one thing is they're about over it. They're really over it. And I think they were probably a little bit, maybe it was a little refreshing for someone to ask them, like, hey, how the ads been? give us on 1 to 10, or what
Right.
percentage you see like this. And they were engaged with that because I think they're over it. And it's a lot of money for a district. Any district, that's a lot of money. Yours has never seen anything like this before. No. So they're just like, please God, make it end. And yeah.
There's a U.S. Senate race to replace Senator McConnell right now. And I can't tell you how many, there's probably 10 candidates in it, but there are 3 who are spending money, lots of money. And they're not spending as much on that Senate race in my congressional district as my opponent and his proxies and me and my supporters are spending for the congressional race. Like, we're outspending the Senate candidates in my congressional district on both sides, I believe. And so that's not typical. But we do verbatims on our internal polls as well, and those are fun to read. Where you, by verbatim, it's just an open-ended question. What do you think?
Yeah, that's probably what keeps it most interesting for me. So it's it was a fun district, and we'll do it again. We'll definitely will. And
do you have any
apologize to the people of the 4th already? I'll pre-apologize before we do it preemptively. I don't mean to bug you and call you one more time, but we're going to.
Well, I hope you do. We're going to poll it 1 or 2 more times too. I would be remiss if this is the first time I've been on a podcast here with you. And you obviously know a lot about polling. You've done it all around the country, and you've done it in my district. By the way, this is not cheap. It's not easy to do. I don't even want to tell you what we pay for a poll, but it's in the tens of thousands of dollars.
Massive amount of money. Yeah.
So, what is your advice for me?
You got, in the very beginning of the interview, you got it. I'd say, get up on the laurels. Keep shaking the hands, and you already said it. It's not like I'm giving you too much advice here, but at this point, I think the negative is going to do about as much as the negative is going to do, and something positive and a reminder of what you stand for is probably the best thing you can do to reinforce who you are. Right? That's their biggest question. I don't know who the opponent really is. I don't know what he stands for. I understand I'm supposed to hate Thomas Massie, but I don't know what he would do. I don't know what would make him any different. I have no idea about him. And then in the beginning of the interview, you said it, so you see it. Spending money, and if this is what happens, then the Gallrin campaign is really to blame for themselves. Spending money can drive turnout higher. They may have spent so much that it's going to backfire, right? So, and another pollster are polling in the district talking about this. Like, they really need 18 to 29 to be 3%, 5% if they're lucky. They can't. And the problem with that concept is that this isn't a district that's like a typical Republican primary. There's no voter registration gains in the 65 plus. It's not been like that forever. A lot of the new families, 30 to 44 years old, they're most of the new families, and under 44 is surging in registration in like Boone and other places. So, you know, they need like the Fox audience to come out and only come out. And you spent that much money, you might have driven interest. Plus, I think your role in the Epstein files is about the, you know, it's going to be hard for the right period to turn out younger votes going into the general. And the Epstein files, they're definitely working on your favor. That's for sure.
Can I ask you, and this is, I'm interested in the answer, but also I want your listeners to know this. Did you test Trump's favorability among likely Republican voters in my congressional district?
Yeah, we did. And a little bit stunning how much negative he has. All right. So
what was his fave unfave? Do you remember?
You know what? I can look it up right here. Let me check it out right now. Take me one click. It was, you know, the president, just to give people an idea, because I know there was a lot of talk. People got fact checked over it. We asked people what they identified as, whether it was Republican, independent, or whatever, because this district is known for their independent streak. But they were all registered Republicans. So there it is. I was going to say about a third, and I just wanted to make sure I was right about that. So it's 32.6% who had an unfavorable or disapproval of him, which was, to me, we just don't see that in many Republican primaries. Even if the Republicans president at that time is not doing well, maybe you get an 18-20%, especially Trump. They get Republican voters give Trump a lot of grace. But this was particularly bad, Congressman. I mean, 32.8 is what it is. Yeah. Overall combined, which is
well, here's I usually don't talk about internal polls, but since I'm talking to a pollster, like ours show about 25%.
Yeah.
It's like 75-25 in the district. And this is the point I wanted to make for your listeners, because this may be interesting. You see these national polls and they say he's not favorable, that his favorables are bad. Well, actually, when I tell people, you know, close friends, that in this congressional district, Trump has a 75% approval rating among Republican voters, they're actually surprised that it's that high.
It's that high, yeah.
And so what I have to implore upon them is people who like Trump will also be voting for me, because if that's not the case, you know, then you can't win with the 25% who dislike Trump. And even the 25% who dislike Trump, there's some of those are not my biggest fans, right? It turns out that I am winning a large, almost a majority of the people who have the favorable view of Trump.
Yeah, that's curious. I'm going to go and dig into that a little bit more. And that's something to share, because it reminds me of what happened to Republicans in 22 when they didn't do as well as they wanted to. They thought they were just going to ride, you know, if we win 98% or 95% of those who strongly disapprove of Biden, and then just, you know, win a sizable amount of this, or you had to win them, of those who somewhat disapproved of him, then they would get a much larger lead on that generic ballot that they thought. Well, at the end of the day, they actually lost against among the voters who somewhat disapproved of Biden. They actually slightly lost them, which is similar to what we see here. So you win a larger share, much larger, of those who have a very unfavorable or strongly disapprove, and then you do well with the other voters too. And that's a problem to beat an incumbent. That is people know who you are, right? And while your numbers yourselves took a hit, it's like they still know what you're going to do, and that is a question mark with the other candidate.
I think what's probably driving my opponent's team insane is that they can't find anything negative I've ever said about Trump. It doesn't exist. I've never disparaged the man. If I disagree on policy, I disagree on policy. This is the way I am in Washington, D.C. Even when he's attacked me, I don't attack back. The press wanted to know what I had to say for myself when he called me a moron at the prayer breakfast. And I said, I'm glad I'm in his prayers. You know, like, and in 2020, when he called me a third-rate grandstander, I said, I'm at least second rate. Come on.
You're better than me, Congressman. I can't help it. I fire back. You're better than me on that. I mean, that's
never,
true, you know?
And I do. I agree with him, 91% of the time. If you include all the positions he's taken, like, I agree with him 100% of the time, because we weren't going to have another war. We weren't going to reauthorize FISA without major reforms. We were going to release the Epstein files. Like, these were all positions in the 9% of the time where I'm not voting with the party or with him, as they say. I'm taking the position that he or JD Vance had during the campaign.
And he was, by the way, he was underwater, which is public. It's not like I'm telling you something special here. He was underwater on his approval. We asked a series of things. Iran was not popular. But the handling of the Epstein files went, he was negative on this. This is a Republican electorate, folks, right? It's a closed primary. Shockingly high number, though, did say that actually I consider myself independent. Now, we know they're not. We know from their voter registration that they are not. There's a voter file source poll, but they called themselves that. And your district also had a higher number of people who said, I'm calling myself independent right now, but if you would have asked me a year ago, I would have told you I was MAGA or America First. And the reason why we're asking that is because we're seeing this in a lot of different races, but also nationally. The number of people who say, I'm a Republican, I consider myself a Republican, regardless of what their registration is falling. And for a while, we went probably about a month before it dawned on me to ask this growing number of independents, were you MAGA before? Did you consider yourself MAGA before? And in your district, it's higher than the national average. So that was maybe not that surprising, but it was interesting. And it's usually about 15 to 18% nationally. Yours was like a little over 20%. So, I mean, these are just people who are upset. They're mad at everything you just said. We were not supposed to have a new war. We weren't supposed to do this. The Epstein situation, whatever it may be. And usually it's a collection of things. And how do Republicans get those voters back for the midterm? At this point, guys, not easily. But I'll tell you what, I don't think the best thing to do is to spend $25 million to go after an incumbent who represents their wing of the coalition. I just don't see how that's smart. I just don't.
They're going to wish they had that money back. The money they're spending. And by the way, these are Republican mega donors that, even though they're woke Republican mega donors who support abortion,
they do,
DEI and transgenderism, and foreign aid, like, they're a special kind of Republican. In fact, these, as you guys alluded to, they were very much against Trump, his first time around. But they do, Miriam Adelson, she's the one, I think, the biggest donor to Republicans, perhaps. And
I think that's right. I think that is right. Biggest single donor. Yeah, I think that is correct.
They're going to wish they hadn't spent her money on this race when they need just one more seat to be in the majority. I mean, I'm going to wish that too, but
well, I mean, I'm in North Carolina. I wish it went toward Michael Whatley. I don't want Roy Cooper to be my senator. I'm just going to outwardly say it. All right. Unlike other pollsters, I don't insult people's intelligence and pretend like I don't have my own political views and I'm somehow, neutral. It's kind of ridiculous. Of course, all pollsters do. All pundits do. Some are just open about it and others are not. Our Supreme Court's going to go, Congressman. And so if the Supreme Court comes down and gives a favorable opinion on the Voting Rights Act, it won't matter, because here in North Carolina, when we redraw those maps, even if we still have our majorities left to do it, by the way, when we do, if it's favorable and we're trying to pick up seats and put an end to that, it won't matter, because the new liberal majority in the state Supreme Court will vote it down anyway. Because we actually had one for years, and in 22, we were able to take it, along with a lot more seats in the legislatures. That'll all be gone. We could have used that 25 million over here, guys. Right? I mean, it's just it's not a smart use of money. I don't know how you can argue it is. And again, I could put it up again for everybody to see, but I think everyone saw it clear as day before. I mean, 18 to 64.
Well,
who votes in the future?
Think about this, Rich. Dogs don't bark at parked cars. They think it's worth spending, over 10 million. I don't know what the exact number is, but I'm going to say it's over 10 million all in before it's over. And they think it's worth that to take me out. Not because I am one vote out of 435. It's because I bring a lot more to the table than just one vote. I am transparent. I explain what happens when it does happen. And I don't, I don't place the party or the president over the people of Kentucky's 4th district. I report to the people that elected me, not to the party when I get there. People ask me, do you think the elections are secure? I say, I watch the elections get stolen every 2 years. And they say, what do you mean? I said, well, in a republic, you elect somebody to go vote for you in Congress, and they go to Congress and hand their voting card to the majority whip. And that's where your vote got stolen.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So that they can get invited to the dinner. They don't even get a bridge for your district out of the deal, right? Yeah. Like, it's not a
that's so tragically true, Congressman. It really is. We're all focused on machines and unsolicited vote by mail. But the truth is, the donor stole your vote already. They already stole your vote. And you answered it already, but that was probably the one thing I was most curious about. And I think other people are too. Someone we mutually know. Of course, I'm not going to blow him up over here, but he's in the Trump administration and he likes you. Personally, I can't say that out loud. God forbid, guy. Gotta have the bullseye on his back. But I said, what do you think the biggest problem really is here? And he said, Thomas Massie can be a little difficult sometimes. I get standing on your principles, but it can be tough. There's about really, how DC is. It's about relationships, and you alluded to it before. If you're a lame duck, then it means it's hard to get your stuff through, because this is very much a quid pro quo system. I'll support your bill, help me with mine, kind of thing. It's just the way it works. And what would you tell to people who say, yeah, I get he's standing on principles, but it makes it difficult for us? How would you answer that?
You mean it makes it difficult at the White House
to build a coalition? Yeah, to put things together, to get the sausage made and
look at the Epstein coalition I built. The bill passed 427 to 1 in the House and 100 to nothing in the Senate. Don't stay stuck on stupid, like our speaker did for 5 months, disparaging the bill, and taking, frankly, the wrong side of history in this case. I give the Senate credit. They passed my bill before it got there. As soon as it passed the House, they deemed it passed whenever it arrived at the Senate. That's how fast
they knew it was coming.
They knew it was coming. Yeah. They watched our Republican leadership commit political malpractice for 5 months. And then the Republican leadership in the House turned around and said, vote for it.
I think your colleagues understood the political danger here of this issue?
It doesn't matter if they understand. They are committed, the majority of them, to being rubber stamps, and they're terrified of the White House. So my advice, if there's somebody at the White House listening and they want to build a coalition for this fall where we don't lose the majority, is that they should start keeping some of their promises. And it won't be enough to release another 2 million Epstein files. Yeah. You got to convict some of these bastards. Right?
Well, what do you say to Todd Blanche, who just says, oh, I've seen it, there's nothing there? It's like we're all reading something different. It's weird.
I would say go talk to Melania.
Oh, yeah.
Even the First Lady knows. She said that Epstein did not act alone. And there are names in there. People ask, when you're going to read the names. They're in there. Yeah. There's 3 of them. There was one guy, I brought him up in the hearing where they had redacted his name on a file where he was listed as a co-conspirator in a child sex trafficking case. If they want to build a coalition for this fall, look at the coalition I have built. There's populists. Don't go for the, don't adopt any of the left's ideas, but there's some Democrats. And that's what Trump did to win his presidency. He brought on independents and Democrats, and that's what I represent. My message to them would be, go look at the donor map of our money bomb, because we did it in real time. Tens of thousands of people, all, and all across the district. We had them in every congressional district. We've got donors. And if I lose, those people are going to be disaffected.
Yeah. That's exactly the biggest worry and concern since this started. Like you said, you've really, even before you had a candidate, you were being challenged. It was you were undersold. So that was even since last summer, going into the summer, everyone kind of knew it was coming anyway. That was my biggest concern was like, okay, so it's like the biggest Pyrrhic victory, Congressman, like ever. Is that what you're seeking? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Even if they win, they lose. It doesn't make sense.
I don't know who the person is, but I kind of have a guess of who the person is at the White House.
I'll tell you off the record.
Okay. Yeah. I think I know who it is.
You probably do. Yeah.
I mean, there are people at the White House at the highest levels that I used to speak to weekly, strategizing against Biden when they weren't in the White House, right? They were in think tanks. They were, doing their own things. And on my drive to and from DC, I strategized with these people at how to keep Biden from changing this country for the worst. And oftentimes against Republican leadership. And so I think I might know who you're talking about. But my advice to them too, on the coalition, look at the coalitions I'm building. And it's the same coalitions that they won the White House with, MAGA. Okay. Instead of pimping an immunity shield for glyphosate that would apply to a German company, but instead of doing that by executive order and pushing it through the House, through legislation, through Mike Johnson, and through the courts, the Attorney General Pam Bondi took Bayer's side for Roundup. Like, instead of doing that, you're pissing off like a lot of the base that got us here. Quit selling out to the lobbyists and the big corporations and bring the people back in the fold, the MAGA folks. Make it easier for farmers to sell their products and be successful. They don't want, the farmers are taking a real beating over the tariffs, and the price of fertilizer has gone up over this war, and they're doing their best to stay afloat. Don't make the situation such that they need a handout. Give them conditions where they can succeed and lower the regulations, like with a Prime Act bill. Do those sort of things. That's my advice to them. Look at the coalitions that I'm building. And on FISA, do FISA reform. Would it kill you? Like, I know Republicans want to be able to spy on folks just as much as the Democrats do. Some Republicans in Washington, D.C., I should say.
Is that what it comes down? Is that what it comes down to? Like that questioner's comment before. Why is this so hard? What did they get out of it?
Because we've gone from the unity party to the uniparty. And I'm still in the unity party. And too many people rode the wave of the unity party with, Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy. And a lot of libertarians voted for Trump. I had that conversation with Trump before I endorsed him, and he said he was going to free Russ Ulbricht. He told me, he said, put that in your endorsement. It'll help us get the libertarians. You can go back and see my endorsement of Trump.
I remember.
And he did. He released Russ Ulbricht in time so quickly that I took Russ Ulbricht to the first State of the Union, which happens, not long after the president's sworn in. So go back to that thing. Go back to the coalitions we were building and quit beating up the one guy that represents at least 30% of the Republican Party uniquely most weeks in Congress.
Yeah, and I'd just point out again, because to me, this is just how my brain works and how I'm always thinking, that 30% over time, that was the growing percent. Like, that's basically, I've been saying all the winning parts, because, it's just not enough. Fox, Hannity viewers are not enough. Like, that's not enough. I don't know how to say it.
Look at the big, beautiful bill. They couldn't help themselves. The Uniparty added $400 billion of spending to that bill. And in order to make up for the spending, they make all the tax cuts expire in 3 years. Like, the tax on overtime, no tax on tips, the bigger deduction for seniors. That's going to be a rug pull in 3 years, because the folks in DC couldn't help themselves and added spending to the big beautiful bill, not the kind of spending that people wanted. They expanded the DOJ.
Unfortunately, Congressman, I hate to say this, but if unless there's some huge directional change, which can happen, this is politics, it's how it works. But typically these narratives get built over time, and I'm feeling more like this is a read my lips, no new taxes narrative than it is anything else like I'm providing as an alternative. But when those provisions sunset, there very well may be a Democrat there instead. So I mean, I hate to say it, right? And certainly a majority once upon a time.
And if there's not a Democrat there, they'll call it a fiscal cliff, because what will happen in 3 or 4 years is that taxes will go up under current law. Taxes are going to go up in 3 years, and spending's going to go down for the DOJ, for DHS, and for the military, because the spending they put in there is a bolus that lasts 3 or 4 years. And they'll run around in DC with their hair on fire if it's Republicans in charge. And they'll call it a fiscal cliff, because I saw this at the end of 2012.
Brinksmanship politics, back to that.
And so they will, it's likely that they may renew it, but when they renew the spending and the tax cuts, they make the deficit even worse. And the real tax is the spending, because they'll take it out of your hide through inflation or through interest rates. You can't take water out of the deep end of the pool and put it in the shallow end of the pool and expect the shallow end to get deeper. It all comes out of somewhere. And so when they try to say that the big beautiful bill balances in 10 years, the reality is they will abandon the big beautiful bill, the financial plan of it, the spreadsheet. The last 6 or 7 columns will never happen.
Right.
And so they're just going to massively add to the debt and the deficit. So anyways, people,
I hope, finish your thought. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I better run. I've got other stuff to do. This has been so fun that I ran over my next.
I know you did, and I'm like trying to communicate with you people. Like I didn't take them too long, did I? But I'm glad you did, and I really, really appreciate the time. And I'll show you this right now. It's up. The story's up. That's a massive amount of money. I mean, congratulations on that.
Oh, is my story out?
Haul. It's out. It's out.
Okay.
The Daily Caller now. It's 2.5 million in Q1. Again, which makes me kind of feel, guys, like you spend that kind of money against somebody, it can backfire, and then they fundraise too, and then they turn out. It generates more enthusiasm and excitement around the race. It gets more attention. So it almost would have been smarter to not do this and try to just have a 65 plus electorate.
There was only one congressman that raised more than $2.5 million last quarter. This Mike Johnson.
Wow. That's the headline.
Yeah. Well, we don't know what he's raised this quarter, but I suspect if you look at individual donations, not transfers from other political entities and not from corporate PACs, it's possible that I raised more money this quarter from individuals than any other member of Congress. And it's almost a certainty that I've got more donors in Q1 of this quarter than any other Republican in Congress. Like, we won't know until April 15th. We won't be able to fact check that. That tells you where the grassroots is.
Yeah.
That's the message that money is spending. Like by the way, those things you see on Twitter where somebody's asking you to send money to my campaign, I literally write those. Okay.
You do it yourself.
Because I'm not paying a consultant a percentage.
Good for you.
If I'm going to raise money $20 at a time, I'm not giving 10 or 20% to somebody. I'll write the daggone tweet myself.
It's disgusting how much people pay social media teams. It's disgusting. And folks at home, that's funny and that's rare to hear, because I guarantee you so many of the people, if we went through a list, Congressman, I think people would be surprised at how many people I could say, oh no, He doesn't write those. And matter of fact, this is who writes them. This is, this is the consultant who does it. So good for you. I always thought it was a waste of money.
Well, when I say, I know more than once I've said, send Washington, D.C. a message. Okay. Your $20 is going to send Washington, D.C. a message. That is a message right there. $2.5 million in a quarter.
Yeah.
And tens of thousands of donors, and an average donation under $100. Remember, there's some people giving $7,000 and the average is still under $100.
Yeah. It gives you an idea how broad that base is.
Right.
And I'm going to be honest, that question about door knockers that we asked, that's an enormous, that's big for a district. Just so people understand, comparing it, we asked, have you been knocked on? Usually it's just a question to draw out whether or not they've seen grassroots support for a candidate in any way, right? And some people, when they may tell you yes, they're not meaning like that specific campaign. Maybe they talk to somebody at church and they're whatever it may be. So we're trying to gauge that number. You're over a third. That is a lot for a case. So normally, guys, to give people an idea, it'll be like 15% who will say, yeah, I've been knocked by that campaign. And it's because they may actually have door knockers in certain parts of the district. That's a lot. It just tells me of grassroots support. That's what it tells me.
By the way, one of the best things about your poll is I've given a lot of money to my pollster, and with no way to confirm his results. He could be using a random number generator or copying crosstabs from another congressional district on stuff. But the good thing about your poll is now I know my pollster is at least in the neighborhood, in the zip
doing
code.
a good job. Yeah. It is tough. It's like a blind faith until you know. And in districts, a lot of people don't poll them. So you as the candidate,
and I get
when
you're the candidate and thousands of people have your phone number, when a poll is happening, and they usually happen over 2 or 3 evenings, but when a poll is happening, my phone lights up. Hey, I just took a poll. They asked some bad questions about you. Who is it? Who's doing the poll? Sometimes it's us asking bad things about you.
We called a lot of people. Yeah, I better safe than sorry. I like to blanket, especially when it comes to districts. It's just, every pollster's got, of course, things that they're true and tested, ways. You're going to know typically. I mean, I'd be shocked if you didn't, if you didn't get a phone call saying, I just got a poll. Somebody just polled me. I'd be shocked if you didn't hear anything about that. I'd be, it really would.
I've got one poor friend. Every pollster calls him. Like, I swear
he's on the list.
Yeah, he's on the list. He's like, because he must complete the poll, and you guys must know people who complete them. I don't know, but anyways, he always, he's a 4 out of 4 voter.
Vote history that's what I was gonna say. Vote history will definitely put you on that list.
I want to know, could you tell me what percent of the people you poll are landlines, what percent are cell phones, and what percent are text?
Yeah. We didn't do much online with your district at all. It was basically all phone, and ballpark like 70, 20. I think there's maybe some from let me look. I don't think there was. I think it was like 30 or 60 that we were going to do. And some of this I try to keep a little bit of a secret.
I understand. You don't give me your secret
but
sauce.
It's overwhelmingly cell phone. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. And
when you say online, you mean a text and hey, complete.
Yeah, we give people an option. If a lot of people are given the option to click the link if they just want to be anonymous or confidential, and others take it peer to peer, and then most others will just be interviewed.
So in our internals, obviously, we use a mix of those, and I'm biting my tongue.
Have to these days.
Yeah, I would tell you offline what the secret sauce is that we use on that.
I probably would tell you offline too.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah. I just don't want to. Every time I give something too much, my partner, who's / my wife, will reach over and smack me when the camera's off.
It's killing me. I want to read this article. I'll finish with this. The 2.5 million we raised in Q1. It's first of all, I'm humbled. I'm thankful. That's organic. We're not paying. A lot of people do. They call it prospecting.
Yeah.
where they will pay a mail vendor $1 to get back, 10 cents. They might, and sometimes they lose money on their fundraising. On this number is all net except for the 3% or whatever the credit card company
Wow.
takes.
Wow.
So it's really being used effectively, and it's the reason we're still ahead in the face of all this other spending. It's again, the reason we're still in the game is we're spending money, and we've got 36 more days. This is a Monday, so 7 times 5 is 35. So tomorrow it'll be 7 weeks. 5 weeks. We've got to buy 5 weeks of TV, and I'm not giving anything away by saying this, but if we spent $200,000 a week, which our opponents can see this, they can, then we need to spend another $1 million to stay up on TV.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to raise that $20 and $50 at a time. So go to thomasmassie.com, ThomasMassie.com, and look for the donate thing. It'll be front and center, and give what you can, because we're to stay in this narrow lead, we're going to have to keep spending money, and we're going to have to keep raising it. We don't have a big war chest for the next 5 weeks. If we go dark, the race is so close, they could overtake us.
Yeah, you can't go dark. That's not even an option. That's not, you got to leave it all on the field, as they say. And I'll explain that more about fundraising after to these guys. But that's remarkable that there was no, that's all just credit. What wasn't net? It's just credit card fees. That's incredible. And folks, people pay to fundraise. Let me just put it that way. That's the short answer. And it costs money. Well, thank you though so much. You were very generous with your time, Congressman. I really appreciate it. I'll throw the link up there for everybody too, so they can get it. And best of luck. And we'll talk soon.
We'll be watching for your next poll.
Coming soon, folks. Coming soon. We'll do it right down the home stretch, because I can't stand saying, wow, if I just would have waited like 2 weeks, why did I wait? Why did I leave 2 weeks? No, we'll wait. And then I always kind of dip my toe in and out. Maybe you'll get a call. You'll never know. But I'll talk to you soon. I'll keep you posted.
All right. Thanks so much, Rich.
Thank you, Congressman. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thomas Massie, ladies and gentlemen. Put the link down below, and we'll throw it in the comments section. Let me just give you guys an understanding, okay? So many people, so many candidates actually pay. So they'll pay a fundraiser. There are these WinReds and alternatives, and they're taking massive percentages in order to fundraise. They may send out a mailer to fundraise, their emails, all of this. They take a chunk of that. So the fact that when they're reporting it to the FEC and you see so-and-so raised $2.5 million, that doesn't mean they netted it. And then you have to go through their expenditures to see what they still have cash on hand, which I briefly, was looking at the report when we were talking. And then he basically confirmed what I thought that they were trying to say, which is that this is they're keeping most of this. That's remarkable. I mean, I just tell you. All right, let me try. I know Robert's not here. I will do my best to blast through your questions. So let me do it. You ready? Let's do this little lightning round, because I do have an interview I got to go on. But talking with the congressman was a blast. And can you please thank them again, Laura? That was remarkable. All right. We'll put his link out there too. Mark Mitchell, Rasmussen Ransom Fund. Oh my God, that's so fun. You guys keep sending me this stuff. I actually just got a text from somebody that was interesting when I was talking with the congressman, and I was wondering if someone directed that person to try to talk to me and apologize for one of their lame-o things that have happened. I will tell them, okay? Here, Rocket Boy, I will take the picture. I know everybody's used to this now. I'll take the picture, and I will pass it along, all right? Which, believe me, people find amusing. You didn't quit polling, but you quit book club. Fair, Patrick. Fair. I didn't quit. I hurt myself pretty badly. I really couldn't even. I didn't know if I was going to be able to try it last minute. The pain was overwhelming. I was going to do book club today, just so you guys know. But locals, you know this. I hurt myself working out. I thought it was just like a regular torn thing, and you can see I'm moving around. but it wasn't. Apparently it's like there's a word for it, chronic overuse or something. Chronic overuse, whatever. And it just swelled up. I was physically ugly, and I'm not going in front of the camera like Quasimodo. Okay. So I basically was held hostage by my wife and put into, she was right. But to be fair, when I told the first doctor, I think I hurt myself. They did not say that you need to stop, period. Yeah, you did. They didn't. And I needed to stop, I guess, like, period. And she was like, no, if you go lighter, you should be okay. I did go lighter, a lot lighter. And it was weird. It was like certain angles. And now since and it stinks, all I can do is like lower, I can do legs, I can do cardio or something, but not even full cardio, because it's certain angles that I turn my arm. That's when goes all the way up to my tricep and stuff. So yeah, it just happened around that time. It's amazing too. My wife's friend is a physical therapist, and she was like, you saw somebody about this? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, are you aware? Like, you're not symmetrical here. You're asymmetrical right now. You don't see this, and it's warm. You're hot. I'm like, uh-oh. She's like, you have to go get checked. So that's what happened. Unless something's killing me, I normally don't want to check. I go get myself checked at all. Like, doctors to me, until something's really bothering me badly and I can't deal with it anymore. Maybe that's stupid, and I'm sure it is, but that's me. I'm old school like that. Jonathan, are you optimistic for somewhat of a turnaround, Rich? If you're going to say we're bound for a decade plus of Democratic rule, then I'm going to self-delete. Listen, like I told the congressman, it's politics and things can change on a dime. But for the midterms, Jonathan, I at this point, I'm not really sure there's anything Republicans can do to turn this around. The war that was like kind of it. I mean, if you look at these numbers, whoops, that's not it. Let me remove that. Let me put this up. There it is. You look at some of these numbers. The problem when you're underwater like this and you swing like this, so negative. And then here, we told you in our polling at the end of March that this was really bad. Those people need to be motivated to vote. Now, you can see our swing is not as bad as CNN. It's not as bad as CBS. But they exaggerate stuff. This is what they do. The fact of the matter is, I think we're probably, well, it's a fact. I believe we're probably closer in the neighborhood of right here, but it's not enough. You can't afford to lose the white working class like this. That many. I don't mean lose them, but you can't afford to lose that many. And when they are unhappy with your performance, they do not show up to vote. That's the problem. Again, the pendulum has a way of swinging. At this point, I will let you know if I see something. I don't think I see a way for Republicans to make a comeback here. Did they have to lose as badly as they look like they're going to lose right now? No, but I think if the election was tomorrow, you're looking at, with the gerrymandered seats, you're looking at like probably in the neighborhood of 30 to 35 seats. I'm not kidding. I wish I was. I'm not. Okay, 1 minute. Blaster. Oh, I don't even have a little bit of time after. Okay, I don't. I have a buddy in Tennessee, and that he wanted to help the local race. He stopped. He found out they spent $7 million of the $10 million budget on the primary. Yep, that's it. Is there any chance Mr. Massie can push for pardon? Oh, we did that. Okay. I hope you're doing all right. Since I saw Trump went for Jones and Company, assumed you were next. We've always got you. I love you too, Andrew. Thank you guys. All your support. You give America a voice, and corporate clients want fearless accuracy. Oh, wow. I'm not saying that out loud, but I get your point, Andrew. So yeah. All right, guys. Locals, I will do a private video for you. I promise, that answers the rest of your questions. All right. I do just have a pre-scheduled interview with somebody right now. Again, like literally right now. Again, thanks to Robert for showing up. He had a bounce, and he moved it up and down to be able to get there. And of course, thank you to Congressman Thomas Massie for joining. And his opponent is also very, very welcome. I just don't think he's coming. Don't think he's coming. And it's all right. I know what the strategy. I get it. I've seen it before in the past. All right. So with that in mind, I'm going to kick rocks. Don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them and to share them far and wide. Don't forget to follow me on the gram. The link is below. And don't forget, if you want to learn more about the congressman's campaign, that we will have to put the link on there. We will. Yeah. Okay. And with that in mind, I'm going to go. Don't forget the Instagram at peoples_pundit on the gram. All right, guys, I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching as always.